Welcome to the Arabesque Scissors YouTube channel. I'm Ali Phillips, and in this video I'd like to take you through how to make my compact carry-all, which is a folding grocery bag, perfect for just popping in when you need to grab a few groceries. And when it folds up, it folds into this really neat square that is just held shut by a little loop of elastic. So there's no pockets, there's no binding, there's no exposed seams, it's fully lined and fully reversible. This bag uses just 2 half yards or half meters of fabric, and it makes the perfect stash buster if you've got some fabric that you've been wanting to sew and you just like some quick makes. This is a really simple construction, but there is a bit of a tricky seam here to do on the neck, but I'll take you right through it so that you understand the construction process. And once you've got one under your belt, you'll be able to make heaps without even thinking about it. This is not a super large bag. It's just perfect if you've got a few emergency supplies that you'd like to grab. And I've got a wad of 3 meters of fabric here, and you can see that it fits really well in here. So it's plenty if you just don't want to carry something but you'd rather hold a bag. You can pop it in here and you can keep one of these in your car or in your handbag. It also makes a perfect gift for a very hard to sew for person. So this is a free tutorial on my blog, and you can head to arabesquescissors.com to read all about it and follow along. And if you would like a printable copy, you can purchase the pattern with a full-size template, also available at arabesquescissors.com, or in the description below there's a link to the pattern so you can grab it there. Now, if you love sewing organisational videos that help you level up your skills and improve your sewing systems, I'd love you to give this video a like and hit that subscribe button. Now, to get started, you're going to need half a yard of lining fabric and half a yard of exterior fabric. And I don't even have quite a full width of this here because I've chopped a little bit off the edge of it, and you'll still find you'll have plenty. So you're going to just need to make sure you've got 2 fabrics that coordinate really well together. So about a total of a yard of fabric if you don't want to use 2 different ones. But if you choose 2 fabrics that coordinate, it just makes for a really lovely looking bag. You're also going to need 8.5 inches of round elastic. So this is about 2 millimeters wide, and you can use hat elastic for this, or you can find some of this on Etsy that comes in a large range of really pretty colors. I also like to just use a fun little tag. So this time I'm going to be making this out of a cotton twill tape that's got some little apples on it, and you're just going to need enough so that you can sew one of these apples into the seam of the fabric, just for a really cute fun effect. You're going to need a fabric marking pen that you're happy to mark your fabric with. You're going to need a rotary cutter and a ruler, some paper scissors for cutting out your template, and you're going to need your template. Now, if you're going to follow the tutorial on my blog, I've got measurements there for you to mark up your own template, and if you have bought the pattern, you will receive this full-size template in the pattern. So what you're going to need to do is print this out, and you're going to need to make sure that your printer is set to 100% and no scaling, so that you want this to print at exactly the right size. And when you've printed it, you do need to check this scale square, and the proper way to check a scale square is to place a ruler over the top of this. And if you can see here, I can't see any of the lines of that scale square, so all of this box is hidden underneath the lines on the ruler. And when that's like that, that is exactly the right size. So get started and cut this out, and then we're going to join the 2 pieces together. So now we've got these two pieces cut out, and we're going to join these together with a little bit of tape. What you want to do is take part A of the template, top part, lay it over the grey section and align it perfectly with those arrows that you can see there. And I like to take 3 pieces of tape and start by sticking the middle one down, and then stick one at both ends here. And if it's overhanging, I will just fold that around. Now we have a completed template, and I'll just run through the parts of this template for you. So at the top here, we've got the top handle seam. We've got a mark here where you can align your tag if you want to, and you can also choose a different place to put it if you want, but that's where I've been putting mine. We've got a mark here for the side seam. So this is where we're going to begin and end stitching here for the side seam and the handle. This part down here is the side seam, and this is the base seam. And this marking here is the fold of the fabric. So we're going to fold our fabric and place the template onto the fold exactly up against the edge of that fold. And this is the center front of the whole bag on both of the pieces. So we're going to be cutting out 2 pieces of exterior fabric and 2 pieces of lining fabric. This is going to create our totally enclosed bag that doesn't have any raw edges. So we're going to go ahead and press our fabric so that everything's nice and flat, because if your fabric's creased, it's very likely that you'll end up with slightly inaccurate cutting once you've traced your template on there. So now I've got my first width of fabric nicely pressed. This one's going to be my lining fabric, and you're going to want to slice this into 2 14-inch wide pieces. So this is the width of the fabric, this is the length of the fabric. You're going to slice it up the length of the fabric until you've got 2 pieces. So this is going to be the front lining and the back lining. And then you're going to want to repeat that for your exterior fabric. So now you're going to take one of your widths of fabric and you're going to fold it in half widthwise. And if you've got a directional fabric here, then you're going to want to make sure that when you put your template on here, so if you've got, say, some flowers that you want to go down the width of the bag, then you would put your center fold on this way. But if you find that your width of fabric is facing this way, you're going to have to flip your fabric over so that you can align this facing the right direction. So we're simply going to place this edge that says fold up against the fold of the fabric and align that exactly on that folded edge. So make sure that none of that's poking through, and then grab some pins. You're just going to push a few pins in just to hold this one in place. Okay, and that's the only part I'm going to pin. If you would like to, you can pin right around the edge of this. So I'm just going to now go ahead and trace with my fabric pen along the edge of this template. Okay, so I've got that traced on. So you're going to repeat this for the other lining panel and both of the exterior panels until you have 4 pieces of your bag traced. So before we remove this, I'm just going to transfer the markings on this. So this is the side seam mark, so I'm going to just lift the template up and mark under that, and then I'll put my finger on that and I'll lift that up, I'm going to transfer that mark there. And this one, I'm just going to transfer the mark for the tag here, just on one side. And the only other thing that we need to mark here is the center front. So I'm just going to do that mark there. Then I'm going to cut this out. Then I'm going to take the template off and cut it out carefully, making sure that I keep it folded and I keep my hand pressed down on it as I go around so that the layer underneath doesn't move as I cut. So here I've got all 4 of my pieces, so both lining pieces and both exterior pieces. And the next thing we're going to do is attach the elastic strap that's going to hold this bag together. Take your length of elastic and fold it in half. So put those 2 ends together to the center front, and I'm actually going to hold that in place just with a clip at the moment. So that's waiting there to get basted on. And I'm also going to take my little tag here, and because this is the lining, I just want to check. I'm going to open up one of my other pieces of my exterior fabric, and I want to check that the apple that I want showing is going to be sticking out on the right side of that fabric. So I'm going to also draw a line with my fabric marker where I want to stitch, because I want this to stick out at the right place. I'm just going to sort of check on the back as well, and that shouldn't be too bad. It shouldn't cut off too much of that apple there. So when I take this, I'm just going to measure the seam allowance here. The seam allowance on this pattern is 1 centimetre or 3/8 of an inch. So I'm just going to mark that as well. And because I want this to stick out like this when I sew it on, I need to flip it upside down. So rotate it over. I'm going to line up that stitching line on the edge of, so just checking under there. You can see that's lining up, and I can place a pin through all of that just to hold that in place. So when that gets sewn into the seam, you can see that will flip open and you'll be able to see the apple nicely. So now I'm going to take both of these to the sewing machine, and I'm going to baste both of them in place at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. So now that you've got your elastic and your tag basted on, I'm just going to tidy up these ends here, and the next thing that we're going to do is stitch the top of the handle seams. So you're going to take both of your linings and lie them right sides together and match up the top of the seams here, and just whack a couple of pins in to hold that in place. And the same for the other seam. Now do the same for your exterior fabric. So lie them right sides together and match up those top handle seams. Okay, and now we're going to take both of these to the sewing machine and stitch across the top edge of both of these at a 1 centimetre seam allowance. So now we've stitched the top handle seams, and I've just gone and pressed them open and pressed it open on the exterior fabric as well. So just going to take this lining and place it right side up, and then you're going to place your exterior fabric, place that wrong side up so the right sides of the fabric are together. And now we're going to stitch the handle seam on the exterior of both of these sides. So this is where the marks that we made here on the template are going to be used. So you're going to line up this mark here with this mark here, and place a pin, and then go down to the other end, and we're going to line up this mark here with this mark here and pin. And also we're going to take these two top seams and peel them open, and just make sure that those seams are going to exactly line up. So I like to pin on each side of the seam here, so just diagonally in one side and then out of the other side, and that just makes sure that those have got a pretty good chance of lining up as you stitch them. So I'll just whack another pin in here, and just go ahead and pin the other side here. So we're going to start stitching exactly on top of that mark all the way down, and we're going to finish stitching on this mark here. So make sure you back stitch really well at the beginning and end, and then we're going to repeat that for this side. So starting directly on the mark here and finishing directly on this mark here, making sure to back stitch. So now that we've stitched from this point to this point, just going to snip into this seam at that mark, not all the way up to the stitches, but pretty close. So just on all four ends. So now I'm going to take this and press it, and then turn it right side through, and I'll show you what that looks like then. And now I've given this a good press after I turned it right side out, so you can see that that seam that we've just stitched on both of these sides is now nicely finished. And what we're going to do now is take the part where we clipped into the seam allowance and just pull that out so that this is sticking out. Both the lining and the exterior are sticking out wider than this seam here, so you might just have to manipulate that a little bit just to coax it out of there. And same for this side, so you want that to be a little right angle. So now we're up to the first little tricky part of this bag. We're going to take this exterior and the other side of the exterior and take these bottom corners and place these right sides together. And we're going to line up this side seam all the way up to the top. So I'm just going to grab a few pins And I'm going to align this mark where we clipped together as well, and place a pin, and you can put in as many pins as you would like. So now I'm going to turn it around, and I'm going to take two linings and place them so that these bottom edge of the side seam where the bottom corner is, I'm going to align them right sides together and pin, and then align these top section where we've clipped together as well. And what I'm wanting to feel is that inside I don't have any other layers caught up under here where I'm pinning, because I only want to have the lining here and the exterior side seam here. I don't want to have the handle caught up in there. Okay, so now we're going to flip the bag around the other way. I'm going to take the remainder of the side seam, so one side of the exterior with the other side of the exterior, match up those bottom corners, whack a pin in, and then whack a pin in the top, up where the clip is, and then flip it around and repeat for the last of the lining seam. So both lining seams right sides together, match up the bottom corner and pin. So now we can take this to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch from the bottom corner up to that top mark, making sure that I backstitch really well at the beginning and end, and then I will flip it over, and on the exterior I will go from the bottom corner up to the top mark and backstitch really well, and repeat that for the other side as well. So now we've got both of these side seams sewn, we're going to open out this seam and give it a press so that all four of these side seams are open on the lining and on the exterior. So take that to the ironing board and get your iron in there. It's going to be a little bit tricky because this is not a massively wide space, but just do it a little bit at a time and you'll get that nicely pressed open. Okay, so now I've got all four of my seams nicely pressed open, and I'm going to turn this so that the exterior is now on the outside and the lining is on the inside. So just play around with that until you get that all smooth like that. So you can see nicely got my lining there, got my nice opening for my handles there where we've enclosed all of that. So the next step we're going to do is enclose this neck, and we're going to have to do this in 2 steps because this is basically a big circle, and so you can't sew a circle all in one go, you have to do it in 2 halves. So this is probably the trickiest part of the bag, but if you can master this, you'll be able to make heaps of these without even thinking. So the first thing we're going to do is reach your hand inside and grab the top center front of the exterior, and we're also going to grab the top center front of the lining, and we want to turn these so that they are right sides together. So this center front mark is going to flip over, and this center front mark on the exterior is going to flip over, and we're going to match them up. Now I can't see at the moment whether I've matched them up, so I'm going to pull my hand out whilst I'm holding on to these two parts and pull them out side of the bag and match these up. So I've got these marks right sides together. I'm going to place a pin and then I'm going to work my way outwards from up each side of the centre front until I get to the corner. So I'm going to be pulling on that neck and aligning those raw edges. Now as I come to the corner or the curve, I'm going to pull out a bit more of that, and as you can see these two curves are going to match up nicely. So just line them up and put a pin here and just feel with your fingers, and you can have a look as well. Just make sure that you don't have any other layers of the bag getting caught up here in the pin that you're doing. So put another pin up a bit further, and then we're going to pull out even more of the bag until we get to this top handle seam, and that's as far as we're going to go. We're just going to pull out enough of the bag so that the handle seams are out. So keep lining this up. You're going to have to tuck in the other side of it because basically it's going down inside the bag, and we're just pulling out enough of the layer so that we can match up these two top handle seams here. So peel them open, make sure that they're aligning, and you can put a pin diagonally across that junction, and then just stretch this out and put one more pin there. So that's as far as we can go in this first section. So we're going to be starting stitching just above this junction here. We're going to go around to the center front again, and we're going to work our way out just the same as we did on the other side, but we're going to go the other way. So just looking for that curve to meet up with the other curve. Just aligning those raw edges. And then just pulling on that handle side of the neck here and working your way up until you get to that top handle seam where you can align. So you're going to have to tuck these two edges in, making sure they're not getting in the way. So just feel with your fingers that you've only got the two layers of fabric and not any of the other ones. So line up those two seams, place a pin across the junction, and then just ease your way back down here with a couple more pins. Okay, so what we've got is something that looks like this. This is the neck of the bag with the two curved edges here and the two top handle seams at each end. So we're going to start stitching just above this top handle seam, so just beyond it, all the way around until we get to the second handle seam, and we're going to finish stitching just past this. So we're talking probably ½ an inch past this handle seam. We're going to stop stitching there. So now we've got this stitched, And the next thing we have to do is just clip these curves in the neck edge that we've just stitched. So I'm just going to make a series of probably about 5 cuts just into the seam allowance there, not right up to the stitches but fairly close. So that's 4 cuts, that's enough. And do that again for this side. So now we can pull this back through and you can have a look at the first neatened edge of the neck here. And you can see that we've caught a cute little apple tag nicely on the edge there. And we've got this nicely enclosed. So now we're just going to flip the bag over and we're going to repeat this process. So just reach your hand inside the bag and grab that center front, and then reach in and grab the lining, and the elastic will be on this center front. So you're going to match that elastic to the center front of the exterior here. So you can see I'm grabbing these right sides together. I'm going to pull this to the outside and I'm going to continue the same process that I did on the other neck of the bag on the other side. So match up those center fronts and pin your way around, making sure that you're not catching any of the other layers down inside as you go pinning. So pull it all the way up to that top sleeve seam and work your way around. So now we can take this to the sewing machine and we're going to start stitching directly on top of this line of stitching where this left off. I'm going to stitch all the way around this raw edge and stop right on top of this line of stitching where we started on the other side. So now we've got this second side of the neck edge stitched, and we're just going to repeat the clipping that we did on the other side. So just 4 or so clips just on either side of that little curved corner. Make sure you don't snip your stitches, just up close to them. And this just allows that corner to open out once we turn this around the right way again. So just reach inside and just pull this handle out, and the same on the other side. You can see we've got this nice loop caught in there. Pull out any loose threads that might be peeking through. So now you can just roll this seam on the neck edge between your fingers and just bring that right up to the very edge so that nothing's sort of puckered in. You want it nicely brought right up to the top. So just keep rolling that with your fingers all the way around, and then you can just take that to the iron and give it a really good press. So we're nearly done. Just got the very last part of the bag here, so we're going to sew up the bottom of the bag. So we're going to do this by turning it half inside out again. So we're just going to pull this exterior inside out again, and we're just going to join up this bottom edge. So we've got this right sides together, so just match up this bottom corner. And then turn it around and do the same for the lining here. Except on the lining we need to leave a gap for turning this through. So I like to leave about, so if we measure in the middle, I like to leave about a 5-inch gap or so. And of course this doesn't need to be exact. Now we're going to stitch on the lining from the corner up to this mark, and from this mark up to the end. And on the exterior we're going to stitch right along this bottom edge. So now we've got the bottom seams closed up, and all that's left is to box all 4 corner seams. So we're going to open up this bottom seam and open up the corner and bring those 2 seams together. Place a pin through them so that they stay aligned, and you're going to give the sides further down a bit of a tug and just make sure that this is all properly aligned, and then that's ready to stitch with a 1 centimetre 3/8 seam allowance. So now we're going to reach our hand in through the hole in the lining and grasp the exterior fabric and just gently pull that through right side out. And we need to close up the hole in the lining here. So there's a few ways you can do this. You can just reach your fingers down in there and give that a bit of a tug. Get those raw edges just to tuck in nicely. And you can just put a few pins along there and take that to the sewing machine and stitch it. You can also blind stitch it so it has an invisible stitch, almost like you've sewn it on the inside with the sewing machine. My favourite way at the moment has actually been to glue it. And because this seam isn't really under a large amount of stress, this method's actually not a bad idea. Then I get my craft glue with my nice handy micro tip on it, and then just run a bead of glue just inside that seam allowance. You're just going to stick those edges together. You can run your fingernail along it and just make sure there's a good seal there. And then I like to give that a press, and if you press that with the iron, that will also help dry it really quickly. We're ready just to push the lining back down inside. And just give those corners of the lining, just make sure that they go really nice and deeply into the corners of the exterior, so everything's nicely lined up. So the very last step that we're going to do on the sewing machine is to measure a 1-inch line from the exterior of the handle 1 inch in on that top handle seam, and mark that on the other side as well. So from the exterior edge into the top handle seam, and we're actually going to fold that on that mark underneath so that this is facing in towards the lining. And we're going to take that to the sewing machine and just above where that joins, we're going to put a few stitches back and forth with the sewing machine. So the last step before this is finished is to press some creases into the side of the bag. That just help it sit a bit more nicely. So we've got 1 inch pressed in and tacked down here. We're just going to continue that fold here, either side of the side seam. And just give that a press and you'll see that that will line up with this bottom box corner. And then we're going to flip that over and tuck that out of the way, and then just fold under the opposite side. So continuing the 1 inch side, and I'm just eyeballing this, but you can line that up with that bottom boxed corner. And then you've got a nice pleat that's going to fold in at the bottom there. Okay, so just repeat that. So just make sure that you push the lining down from the inside, make sure it's right up against that exterior fabric, and then slide that over so it's about 1 inch away from the side seam, and give this a press. And then repeat that on the other side. So the only other thing to show you is how to fold it up, because that's one of the nifty parts about this design, is how nicely it folds up. So the first step is to fold the handles down level with the neck of the bag. Then we're going to fold one section in by 1/3, and then fold the other section in by 1/3. Then rotate the bag and fold the bottom up by 1/3, and then the last fold up to meet the top. And then you grab this elastic band and simply wrap that around, and it all stays in place. And the more that you fold this up like this, the quicker it is to refold, and you'll be able to do it super quickly, so you can use it, fill it up, empty it, refold it and stick it back in your bag or in your car, ready for when you've got a few grocery items to go shopping with.